spheres. And if we were to imagine outer space as this void with no friction, and the spheres just sort of turned with eternal undissipated motion, and there was no friction to dissipate their motion, then they would just keep on spinning forever, wouldn't they? So what need do we have for angels to turn these things? And that turns out to be the beginning of the death knell of the angelic cosmology, and will turn out to be, that's the nucleus for the first primary law of physics, the law of inertia, that a body will stay in motion forever unless it's impeded by something external to it. And then one other image just for fun. I had meant to include this earlier, but this is just an example of the sort of thing that went on in the Renaissance with respect to most of the images of the Renaissance, particularly in Botticelli and Michelangelo, less so in Leonardo, because Leonardo is discovering a whole new world, the scientific world. These men are sort of looking back to the past. And they're almost all visual translations of this Platonian cosmology into pictorial imagery. Here you have Minerva, who is the Roman equivalent of the goddess Athena, who's the goddess who is associated with reason. And here she is taming the centaur. And centaurs are always associated with the passions, the desire, lust, and they're always breaking in on parties. I forget who it was about to be married to the gods, and then they were flooded by centaurs, and they broke the whole place up. But here's the idea that it is reason, and man alone is unique in the entire great chain of being, with respect to the fact that he possesses reason. And reason is entirely free. It is not determined by the stars. The lower aspects of the soul are determined by the stars. But reason is the only thing that man possesses that enables him to choose whether to look up or to look down. That is to say, to become involved within the passions, or to decide to make the effort to turn against them and bring them under control through a Platonic education. And this is sort of what she's doing. She is reason personifying the sort of taming and quelling of the passions. And so you see in all the Renaissance images, they're almost unintelligible except as pretty pictures without knowledge of this Platonic tradition. That's a Botticelli image. So that's sort of, I don't know if we want to take a 5-minute break, but that brings us to where I want to bring us right about halfway through here. And the oldest map in the world that we have a record of. This is, it probably is. There are probably African tribal maps that are older, but let's say within the world of respectable academia that it's the oldest map in the world. And it's a Babylonian map dating to about 500 BC, which traditionally, interestingly enough, I think the oldest horoscope dates from, 300 BC? And then in 500 BC, some people think that the Babylonians put together astrology as we know it now. I don't think it's that recent. I think it's much, I think we're probably dealing with the Sumerians as far as that goes. And then pushing it back into the Paleolithic, of course, we've got that wonderful book by Alexander Marshak about the roots of civilization, where he discovered on all these old bone fragments the earliest origins of the calendar, which were lunar calendars. And Marshak's suspicion was, or maybe not Marshak's, it was probably William Irwin Thompson's interpretation that these were women keeping these calendars in accord with the menstrual cycle. Anyhow, it goes way, way back, man's fascination with the heavens, and or rather the human fascination with the heavens. And here we have Babylon at the center of the world. Every civilization thinks it's the center of the world. The Chinese thought that. The Middle Ages thought that Jerusalem was the center of the world. We still think we're the center of the world because we've got all the neatest toys. But we're not. And this is the ocean ringing the world, which translated pictorially, this is an alchemical image, is this serpent biting its tail. It's always pictured that way. The word for ocean is taken from Okeanos, the Greek mythological deity, who is pictured as a gigantic serpent. So it's always represented as a serpent, even though here you don't see the serpent. But this is the world ocean. This is the island of the earth. It's a flat earth in this Babylonian conception. And here is the Tigris and the Euphrates flowing past Babylon. And these are little cities, little Sumerian and Babylonian cities. And the T shape and the O is interesting because when we jump ahead to the Middle Ages, that becomes the way in which the vision of the world is normally represented schematically. These are so-called T and O maps. And here's the O of the world surrounding ocean, mare, ocean. And supposedly it was thought that you just had these three continents: Asia, Europe, and Africa. Looks like we have a guess. And, yeah, Asia, Europe, and Africa. And these were thought to be populated by the descendants of the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And of course, Ham, the basis for racism in Africa goes way, way back, because Africa is the home of the Hamites, and Ham is the cursed son because Ham looked at his father while drunk and naked. And for that reason, he was cursed and exiled. And so Shem then becomes the ancestors of the Semites. And Shem is the sort of, you might say, the tribal being. Rudolf Steiner puts everything mythologically, says Shem was the avatar of the Hebrews, and an avatar dwelt within Shem, and the presence of an avatar within a being enables that being to make copies of its subtle body. And the subtle body of Shem goes out through the bloodline into all the Hebrews. So they're bound together by the single sort of totem god, Shem. Steiner always puts things in the most colorful ways. And then so here you have Europe, which is Japheth, populated by the descendants of Japheth. Mythologically, these names are Queen Asia. Queen Asia is the mother of Prometheus and Epimetheus. And Europa was the woman who was out picking flowers when Zeus decided, as he decided very often, to mate with her, as he was doing this all the time and getting into trouble with his wife for this, and turned himself into a bull, and then came and swooped her up and carried her off, swam across the ocean, and took her off to Crete, where he then propagated the three brothers there, Minos, Rhadamanthys, and Sarpedon, who were the three kings of Minos, and later the Greeks put them down in the underworld as the kings of the underworld. And I don't know who this person is named Afer, and I have yet to be able to track him down, who this A-F-E-R is the mythological descendant, and he's supposedly just a descendant of Abraham. I have yet to find out who he is. But we have then one woman, one continent named after a woman, actually two women, and then the third is named after a man, which will become significant in the naming of America. Then we have, this is the Mediterranean, so that the map is actually, should be, if we tilted it up this way, so, yeah, see Europe and Africa down here with the Asia over here, so that this is the Mediterranean. Then this becomes the river Don flowing out of Europe into the Nile. So they weren't very accurate geographically, but the point for the Middle Ages was to represent things spiritually in a way that could be configured within the ecclesiam in a pedagogical way that could be taught. So this is the TNO map of the world, and it's sort of flat Earth version of it. Here we have the sort of pictographic version of the same map. The T is down here, going this way. There's the Mediterranean. These are the descendants of Ham, the Hamites, who are the cursed races. And this was one of the reasons why the Portuguese thought they could just help themselves to these slaves, because there was already this biblical precedent that this a priori assumption that these people were inferior. And so they're all sort of distorted, and they look like dwarves. This one has no head. Over here, then, we have Europe, and then up, you can sort of see the Red Sea up here in the Asiatic world. To orient oneself, that phrase itself links back with these maps, because to orient a map meant to point it in the direction of the Orient. And here Jerusalem is the bullseye, corresponding with the bullseye in the Babylon map. Jerusalem was the center of the world, and that became part of what was the inspiration for the Crusades. You had to get to Jerusalem if you wanted to get to the spiritual center of the world at that time. And of course, Jerusalem was Arab dominated at that time. So the goal was to kick the Arabs out. And then you have Christ up here represented in his what is normally an apocalyptic mode, and he's sort of swinging the center here, and he's got the two fingers pointing up, representing that he is consubstantial, both man and God. And then you have the angels here, and so you have the flat earth. There's a lot more in there. Probably, yeah, the association that the hinterlands are always the realm of the great dragons. And that's one of my favorite motifs in history, because it's turning back up now in our science fiction films. Do you remember, actually, that leads us to our next point. Here's the voyage of St. Brendan. And it's very probable that the Celts discovered America before the Vikings got here. And the story of Brendan is probably a